All right, we're recording now. So let's get started. All right, Greeny here from Kombat Kingz. Got a very special episode today. We're speaking UFC 300 and a lot more with a very, 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 very special guest in Will from Casuals Corner MMA. How you doing, Will?
I'm good, thank you, mate. I've just finished training at AKA. Done my third group session this week.
Jeez.
And still very new to the game, not just martial arts, but Muay Thai specifically. So cardio still an issue, skill set still an issue, but I'm learning. I'm getting a little bit better. I'm getting a little bit less terrible each time. So apart from that, I'm feeling good. Had a good session, did some sparring, did some clinching, had a little ice bath. So I went full influencer mode and yeah, had a good little dinner. Pad Thai and a burger, and here we are chatting UFC 300. So a pretty good day so far, I would say, mate.
For anyone that's not following your journey, firstly, why are you not following the journey? Go onto his Instagram page and click subscribe and follow right now. But anyone that isn't following the journey, why don't you explain to people what is actually happening here? So,
yeah, for sure. So, as you mentioned earlier, I run a media outlet called Casuals Corner MMA, and that was a brand that I wanted to create where I could essentially go and dip into any avenue I liked, whether it be photography, videography, travel, food, whatever it was, under the guise of MMA. Even though I was very new to all of those things, and I always just quite enjoy picking up different things and trying different things. So what I decided to do when I got to a point where I could work on the brand full time and I could monetize it and it became my full-time income after many years of relentless obsession, I decided that I wanted to go to Thailand. And the main reason was I actually wanted to go and work at a ONE FC event out here in Bangkok. So that was my primary objective, first and foremost, which I'd done
that was the
last month. Yeah, that was the international women's card, yeah. And also, I believe Cade Rotolo is having his MMA debut next month or the month after, June the 7th. So I hopefully will go back to Bangkok and film for that as well, because I'm a big fan of the twins. But that was the initial goal, to come out here and do some work with ONE FC, just because I love the organization. I love the feel that it gives, even just the aesthetic of the event in general. I just wanted to sort of mix it up. I'm very fortunate where I've done Cage Warriors now. I've done PFL. I've been at UFC events. Yeah. So I wanted to sort of try something a little bit different. So that was the main reason I came over to Thailand. And then I basically wanted to coincide that with doing some training myself and, of course, just documenting everything, really. Documenting the travel, the behind the scenes, frequently asked questions, the food scene, the culture, and then, of course, working with athletes in gyms and also doing some work with different gyms as well. So I've been to Bangtao recently. I've been to AKA recently and doing some projects with them now. And just sort of staying quite flexible, bouncing around to different gyms, doing different bits of training and just trying to film as much content as possible, really. So that's sort of where I'm at the moment. So start of my journey in regards to being in Thailand, but also, as I mentioned earlier, martial arts in general. I've never really been able to train just because I've always been behind the camera. And I never had the means to, really, because I was always just putting all my time and resources into the actual brand. So yeah, that's where I'm at so far. That's where we're at.
And honestly, like, as someone over here, I'm enjoying following your journey. So yeah, keep it up, man. It's been fun to watch, like we were discussing prior. So yeah, definitely, man. It's like, anyone that's not locked in, please lock in. Some little nuggets, like, where like you can find out little bits of information that you didn't know. Like, for example, the student visa that you discussed, being able to stay over in Thailand for a year just by studying Muay Thai. Like, I didn't know about that. And I know that a few of the team are thinking about kind of following your steps and going over to Thailand at some point. So those little gems, definitely worthwhile. Another part of your, sorry, no, go on, what were you going to say?
No, that was all I was going to say, is just, I think there's a lot of people doing travel content. I think there's a lot of people doing food content. I think there's a lot of people doing martial arts content, but I don't think there's a lot of people sort of combining all the things. And it's not to say that I'm doing it, I'm trying to do it because there's not anyone else doing it. More so, there's not that much information out there for those sort of things. So when I do post that sort of content, there isn't a lot of people providing that information. So I do think some of the behind the scenes, a little bit like visas, how much it costs, where you can travel to, where you can't travel to, what you may need on a day-to-day, just small little things that maybe you wouldn't think you need, or maybe information that you don't have. So yeah, just a couple of little gems. So I'm just trying to mix it up really. Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate the the fact that you enjoy it. So yeah, thank you.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about was a little while after we first met. So we first met at UFC. Was it Volkov? No, what fight did we meet? It was
the first one. Yeah, the first one.
That was a good little fight. And shout out to you, man. You gave us a little hookup on the night. We won't speak too much about that. But, that I think we followed you from that page. But then soon after, with your Food Fighters edition, I think Dana White was liking your posts. And I know you've been trying to get him onto Food Fighters. That's another part of your channel that I quite enjoy. So why don't you speak a little bit about Food Fighters? Because is it like every UFC event you pretty much break down what it is that you make for food?
It's funny you picked up on that. I didn't expect you to go there, to be honest. But
it was a long time ago, man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, thank you first and foremost. But so Food Fighters originally started just because I've always had a really, really big interest in food and cooking. Is something I've always done and enjoyed since I was very young. And originally, when I got into Casuals Corner, it was not anything that really crossed my mind of sort of crossing the two over. I think I was just too set in the traditional paths of media in MMA. So I was thinking, what are other people doing, and trying to follow those sort of blueprints. And I remember one day that I was watching the UFC event, and just like every other week, I had made something for dinner to watch with the event. I think it was just something like I made some burger and chips or something. It wasn't anything crazy, some wings, and I had a few snacks. And I remember just taking a video of it and just panning to John Anik and saying the best dinner date on a Friday or something like that, right? And it was at a stage when I didn't have much of an audience, and videos never really got any views. And this one got more views than mostly any of my other videos. And then I started thinking, didn't really think of that. So I started doubling down, and then I started creating, like you said, a mini series called Food Fighters, where I basically documented, everything that I ate throughout UFC cards. So everything that I cooked, all the snacks that I had. And then what I wanted to do is sort of evolve the idea. So then as I continued doing it, it just kept growing and people was really enjoying it. And then the ultimate idea is I wanted to scale it so that I could maybe go and cook with fighters, or go and sit down and have meals with fighters and just have candid conversations with them. And then since that, I've been very fortunate where I went up to Liverpool and I went to Molly McCann's restaurant, and we went there before it opened. So we had the whole kitchen to ourselves, and I spent the afternoon with the chefs, and they just cooked the whole menu and we ate everything on there. So that was super cool, and got to spend a day with her and Paddy in their training camp for UFC just before Christmas. And then other people as well that work in the industry that also have, so there's someone that works for Block Asset who owns a sort of like a deli shop. So I went to Liverpool again and met up with him and did some work. And even this week as well, I at AKA, I'm working on maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but I have a ongoing series of called like Casuals Comics, where I just put together different bits of my artwork and work with an artist, and he puts together a comic strip. And I'm working with Mike Swick and AKA to do a special episode for them. And a part of that will be a Food Fighters series where I'm going in the kitchen this week, chatting to the chefs, cooking with them and eating all the food and whatnot. And I started realizing after I was doing this, sorry, this is a bit of a long-winded answer, but
carry on.
I started realizing after I was doing this that firstly, mostly everyone enjoys food. And second of all, the thing that all fighters have in common is they are always craving food. They are always in deficits. They are always dieting. They are always restricting themselves. So when I started meeting a lot of these fighters, they would always say to me, I bookmark your videos and watch them in my weight cuts and things like that. And I'd never thought of that angle of it before. But then when I sort of took a step back and started realizing it's actually it spreads across quite a lot of the audience. So I've tried to increase and do more and more of that. We haven't got the Dana White cosign yet. He has commented on a couple of posts and he has liked a couple, like you said, which is cool, obviously. We haven't got it yet, but it is inevitable. That day will come, make no mistake.
I'm saying UFC Manchester or whatever it is, UFC, wherever they're going to go next, you know, it would be a good shout, man. I think that might be the time for you. All right, let's talk about UFC. So, obviously UFC 300 this week, the biggest card ever. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it is the biggest card ever? Because I know like the main event, people weren't really happy with the main event. I think it's a great main event, and I think a lot of people saying Pereira is going to win. I think Jamal Hill wins personally, but yeah, what do you think about the main event of UFC 300?
Yeah, I agree with you. First and foremost, I think it's very easy. I think Alex Pereira has the same sort of effect on fans that sometimes Russian fighters or Dagestani fighters have, where they have this aura, where they don't speak a lot of English and there's this sort of broken English aura. And of course, incredible skill set to go with it, make no mistake. Yeah. But I think they're letting sort of emotion cloud judgment. And I'm not saying that Alex Pereira can't win. He most certainly can, but Jamal Hill is a tricky matchup for anyone. And this isn't a kickboxing match. This is mixed martial arts. And Jamal Hill is, apart from that one loss to, I was going to say Craig Jones. I was thinking it's not Craig Jones. Paul Craig. Yeah. Apart from that one loss to Paul Craig, who, by the way, beats all the best guys. Ankalaev.
He's been a lot.
Who's the other one he's got?
On his resume.
Jamal Hill, he's got Ankalaev, he's got one more big dog as well. Can't think of it off the top of my head.
Who else did he beat? Who did he beat in England? At that card?
Nikita Krylov, maybe?
Oh, yeah, it's not that name. Anyway.
One of them, regardless.
He's got some names on his resume, Paul Craig.
That's my point, right?
I'm not his biggest fan, I'll be honest, but he's got some names on his resume. I'll give you that.
This is my point, right? And Jamal Hill has a lot of skills, and I think, I think if we look at their career, I've seen Alex Pereira in trouble on the feet and hurt more times than I've seen Jamal Hill. Just from a very simple perspective, not even getting into the X's and O's too deeply, but just from a very simple standpoint.
Level of opposition, though, I think some people might say that. You know, you look Pereira's resume in terms of MMA, he's really only fought the best. Like he's got such a small resume, and then the last like 4 or 5 fights, he's fought killers.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a very fair point, because like you said, you look at his CV, he's fought pretty much exclusively champions. Yeah. My point is, Jamal Hill is a champion, and he is that caliber. So I've seen people like Izzy, I know very elite, but I've seen people like Izzy give him trouble, hurt him on the feet in those exchanges where sometimes his hands are low and he's exchanging with big hooks. Yeah. I can 100% see Jamal Hill catching him in between his strikes like that in the pocket. 100% can see that. But going back to your question, that's not counting Alex Pereira for certain. That man is as durable in regards to his mental resilience. He's as good as it gets. So, but coming back to your original question, do I think it's as good as everyone thinks it is? I think, yes. I think as a fan, for me personally, someone who's maybe followed the sport less time than most, 100% the best card I've ever seen. It's not even in question. I think the only thing which is blurring some of the fans' judgments is the fact that Dana came out and said, the main event is going to blow you away. It's going to be crazy. But in their defense, they tried to make Leon Chimaev. They tried to make Islam Leon. They tried to make these crazy big fights. But as you know, sometimes it just doesn't work out like that. And I think sometimes it just doesn't play out, right? So I think now you're getting into a fight where you actually look at the fight between Alex and Jamal Hill. Whilst I don't think it's the biggest superstar matchup, I think the intrigue is definitely there. And then you look at the rest of the card and it's stupid. Like, let's be realistic. It's literally stupid.
The rest of the card is stupid. What are your standout fights on the card? Because like for me, I think looking from the top to bottom, there's ridiculous amounts of like ridiculous fights, and a lot of them are 50-50s as well. Which I think for UFC events, sometimes we don't get the most 50-50 matchups across the board on a fight night. But like Renato Moicano, Jalen Turner, like that fight for me is like that's gonna blow my mind. What fight is it for you that you're thinking like I can't wait for this one?
Davison Figueiredo, Cody Garbrandt.
What are your thoughts about that? Because for me, like Garbrandt's had the biggest fall off. Like we always discuss this in the cave. Garbrandt has fallen off from that fight with Dominic Cruz, where he looked like he was ready to take over the world and be like another McGregor. To like where he goes on a massive skid and doesn't look like he's capable of winning a fight. If he wins this fight, he really is going to be fighting Sugar, isn't he? He's going to end up fighting Sugar. Like that will happen, right?
I think you're spot on. I think if you beat Davison Figueiredo, you're entitled talks. It's as simple as that. Just through what the man has done, through his brand value, and through his skill level as well, and through the fact that not so recently he just beat Rob Font, who is that guy in the top 5 anyway. So usually you beat Rob Font, you're there or thereabouts. Yeah. And so that's the conversation that you have with Davison Figueiredo, right? I think to Cody Garbrandt's credit, I think it's even more impressive the fact that he reached the top. He was an undefeated fighter. He had the world at his feet. He slipped off.
Yeah.
And massive. Then there's a lot of people and there's a lot of careers. What's that, sorry?
I said that's more than a slip, but I hear you.
Yeah. Let's say a landslide, right? Yeah. A complete landslide. But then there's a lot of careers and there's a lot of people that have then never recovered from that. And we look at the position he's in now. He's putting together a win streak. He's adapted his game a little bit where he started integrating his wrestling a little bit more. He's not always just trying to stay in the pocket and trying to swing haymakers. He's put together some wins. He's put together some finishes. And I think Davison Figueiredo is a horrible matchup for him. I actually think it's one of the worst matchups for him. And I may be speaking out of pocket a little bit, but I don't really see his path to victory. I can't see him taking him down and controlling him. I just can't see that happening. Davison Figueiredo is so strong. His hips are so good. His scrambling ability is so elite. And I think if he stands and trades with him, which I think that's going to inevitably happen, I've seen how good Davison Figueiredo's chin is on multiple occasions. And that's at flyweight when he's having to cut all of that weight and have a really, really tough cut. Now he's going up to bantamweight, more energy, better gas tank. I don't think there's a good matchup for Cody Garbrandt at all. I think he gets knocked out, to be honest.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Cody Garbrandt gets knocked out. We've seen it so many times. I don't know if Figueiredo carries the power at bantamweight though, and I think that he might get through Garbrandt, but then I can't see him at the championship level at bantamweight personally, Figueiredo. But it all remains to be seen. So I look forward to that fight for sure. Another one we got. Arman Sayukin versus Charles Oliveira du Bronx. I mean, that's going to be an absolute slugfest. Talking about potential knockouts. Does that one go past the round? Does that scrap go past the round?
True. Yeah, that's the crazy thing with Charles, right? Is near enough all of his wins inside the UFC are finishes. I think all but 3 have gone to a decision, right? So every time he steps in there, you're more or less looking for the finish. Now, the interesting thing is with Charles is he's always been pretty stubborn with his game in regards to he walks forward. He doesn't care what's coming back at him. He uses very, very outlandish kicks and punches to close the distance, whether it's flying switch knees, whether it's like crazy exchanges to close that distance and then sort of enforce his grappling if he doesn't knock you out in the transition. However, more recently against Beneil Dariush, after the Islam fight, we saw him be a lot more patient. We saw him draw out attacks. We saw him use feints and fakes that we haven't really seen before. We certainly didn't see against Islam. So it's interesting just to see what sort of Charles shows up, because although Arman is a young veteran, make no mistake, this is the biggest event he's ever been on. Of course it is for most people. But this is the biggest stage, right? This is the biggest stage, even though he's fought Islam. Sorry, go on.
This is his best opponent. I know he fought Islam, like what you was going to say. I know he's fought Islam, but
yeah,
that was a young Islam who's kind of fresh-faced. Like, this is definitely Arman's toughest opponent on paper so far. Biggest test for sure. But I mean, but their last fight, both of them was Benil. And we saw how that all went down with Saryukin that was a 1-round finish. A dirty finish at that. I'm really intrigued to see how that one goes down, because again, it's another fight with championship. Whoever wins this is going to surely fight for the belt, after Islam fights Poirier, which is another matchup that maybe we can speak about in a little while. How do you see it going though with Charles and Arman?
It's difficult because Arman's at that sort of age and he's at that sort of experience level now where we look at Charles and we sort of know what we're going to get pretty much each and every time. Like I said, he did just adapt his game slightly, but we kind of know what he's going to look like. But where Arman's still very young and where he still is fairly green to the game in some respect, sometimes you see exponential growth between fights, right? So it's a tricky one to call because we could see a version of Arman where it just blows us out the water and goes, yeah, this is the guy, right? Or Charles is just that guy. Charles is just that guy, and he's going to make you feel the pressure, and he's going to make you make mistakes. And that's what he does better than anyone. He puts you in a pressure cooker, and he makes you make mistakes. Whether it's on the feet or whether it's on the ground, he forces you to make mistakes. And he fights at a tempo and a pace where you make them. And we know that Charles gets clipped sometimes. We know he gets hurt. But also, we've seen that with Arman. We've seen his defense be a little bit leaky at times.
Yeah.
And Charles is a tough guy to have that against because, like I said, if you make one mistake against him, that could be it because he's such a prolific finisher. I would have to favor just the experience of Charles on here. I think he might. I'm just gonna win. I don't know how he does it, but I'm gonna say he wins
by something special. The one thing because I've got Charles in that fight, but the one thing that's got me thinking at the moment is those grappling exchanges, those scrambles. Arman's shown in the past how good he is in those moments, and I think that if you can out scramble Charles, which not many people can, but if he's able to out scramble Charles, I think he can hurt him on the feet because Charles does get hurt, he does get clipped. I mean, I think he's been clipped. Outside of the Dariush fight, he's looked like I think he's been clipped in his last 5 fights. He's ended up on his backside, and in most of those fights, he goes on and wins because he's so good on the ground. But I think if Arman does get on the ground with him, I think in the scrambles, I think he's got a little bit. He could pose a little bit of a problem for Charles in that regard. But another great scrap.
What I want to add to that as well is you're not wrong, and the grappling of Arman Tsarukyan is as high level as it gets. We've seen that so many times in the UFC, not to mention his debut against Islam, which is one of the best grappling matches you'll ever see in the UFC. But the thing with Arman is in all of the fights that he's ever had, no one has ever attempted a submission. Not one person. So that's kind of crazy, right? Because usually people respect his grappling so much and people don't usually want to be there, that he's never felt a submission offense in the UFC. So you know for a fact that Charles will bring that, and he doesn't bring it stereotypically. He'll invert, he'll look to find the back, and as soon as you frame for ground and pound, he's going to be looking for all these different types of inversions and trying to take the back and submissions, which I'm not saying that Arman isn't capable there. I'm just saying he hasn't necessarily seen that inside the UFC. And when you're maybe a little bit tired and emotions are flying and energy's ramped up, Charles is that guy. So yeah, it's a tough one. Don't get me wrong. I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah, it's a close one.
It's a 50-50 fight, and that's why this event is so good because I mean, look at the fights that we've just spoken about. All of those could headline like pay-per-views almost. I mean, I know there's no belt in the line for those fights, but definitely fight nights, and some of them would end up on other pay-per-views. I always say crazy things on the podcast here. If Charles loses. Because I think you put on your page the other day a potential fight between Charles and Conor. If Charles wins, I can't see that Conor McGregor fight happening. But if he loses against Arman, I think the only place for him to go is Conor. So I think even if Charles loses, I think it's a win-win for him, because I think any little dent in the armor, Conor McGregor will be there ready to take it on, I reckon. Because that could potentially be the biggest fight UFC's had.
True. I think, in all honesty, I think win or lose, I think Conor McGregor will like that matchup. If you 100%, don't get me wrong, very dangerous, very dangerous. I haven't got to explain that. I've just spent 10 minutes saying how dangerous he is. But if you're Conor McGregor and okay, what's my best path to victory against anyone? Okay, it's my left hand and it's knocking them out. Okay, so you're going to look at that top 5 or top 10 in the UFC and you're thinking, okay, I want big matchups, big names, big challenges, cool. Now I want someone that I can clip. Your mind's going to be going to Michael Chandler. Your mind's going to go to Charles Oliveira. Because like what you said, what did you just say? You said he's been clipped 5 times in his last fights. And Conor will look at that and think, yeah, they don't hit like I hit. I hit different. And he does. He does. So he does. Right? So it's actually and you have to think as well, the thing with Charles is, as devastating as his ground game is, he's not necessarily a wrestler. So usually how he gets to there is knockdowns, is opportunistic sort of entanglements, right? So Conor will be thinking, my defensive wrestling is good enough to mitigate any takedown, keep it standing, I'm going to knock him out. So I think he'll look at that fight, win or lose, and think, yeah, I like the sound of it. Plus, he's a big name. So
maybe at the end of the year, I want to see that fight. I think that's a fight that all fans in MMA, I mean, that's a crossover fight. Like that gets the eyes and the attraction of like more than just your casual fans. I think a lot of it's Conor McGregor, but then it's Conor McGregor and it's Drew Bronx. I think that's a great scrap, and UFC will make that in time, I think. And I didn't even think about what you just said. I think what you just said is spot on. Conor McGregor probably does look at that fight as something quite favorable.
100%.
Another fight then, just after that one on the card, we got Max Blessed Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. I mean, for the BMF belt, I don't know what your thoughts on the BMF championship are, but what about that scrap, man?
I don't even want to be a party pooper here. I actually don't. The only a little while ago, I said that I wasn't as excited as I should be for this fight. And it was purely because the BMF belt, to me, is a belt where you have 2 people that fit the description, which is definitely the case, but also 2 people that are in somewhat of a stalemate of their career where there's not many other things going on, where they sort of need to fabricate a big event, right? So Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, the first one, that's perfect because very fitting of the description, great matchup, and neither of them were really challenging for the belt or doing much else. They're a bit stagnant.
Yeah.
Max Holloway could arguably be fighting for the featherweight belt, and Justin Gaethje could arguably be fighting for the lightweight belt, right? We should be, yeah, but that's my point. It is like should be. So it's a bit weird to have it because they both sort of have other commitments. Saying that, I think I've got quite an unpopular opinion on this fight.
You're going to say Max?
I'm saying Max with chest. I'm saying Max. I'm saying Max confidently as well. And the closer it gets and the more I think about it, the more confident I get. Now, I'll preface this by saying...
Break that down for me, man.
I'm not... What's that?
I said break that one down for me, man, because I'm
excited. I'll preface this by saying every time I give a prediction, it's not necessarily saying the other person cannot win. I'm not sitting here saying Justin Gaethje has no chance, no path to victory. That's stupid. Like, I'm not here to say that. But what I am here to say is similar to Alex, I think the same fate that Jamal Hill is suffering against Alex Pereira is the same fate that Max Holloway is suffering against Justin Gaethje. I think when you look at Justin Gaethje, you see highlight reels, you see bonus machine, you see heavy hitter, you see knockout much, you see all of these things. And then you look at Max Holloway and you think, okay, this is a guy that gets hit a lot, moving up from featherweight. So the narrative is already built in, right? But if I actually switch that around and we sort of look at it from a little different perspective, I would say to you, let's take a look at the most recent Max Holloway. The most recent Max Holloway is Arnold Allen. Now, what was his approach to that fight? Completely different to any fight he's had previously. He moved laterally more than he's ever moved. He was counter-striking more, so much so that Arnold Allen got completely thrown off by his game plan and did not anticipate that. Now, the reason why that's important is because although we don't hear a lot of Max in the media, we don't hear him talk about training camp that much, make no mistake, this man is really on a mission for greatness. And you can't do that by being stuck in your ways and your approach. So there was a time where we're used to seeing Max stand in the pocket, trade, and go hell for leather. I don't think that's what we see anymore. I really do think we're seeing an evolved version. And this time round, going up to lightweight, he spent the actual time growing into the body, building muscle correctly. And we're talking, people are saying his chin's going to get cracked against Justin Gaethje. His chin should be better than ever. He's moving up a weight class, right? Not making a difficult cut to featherweight. And this is going to rattle a few feathers, but I'm going to say it anyway. Minus the Dustin Poirier fight, when's the last time that Justin Gaethje put someone out cold?
No,
a while ago.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
A while ago, right?
Yeah.
And let me just finish on a couple other things. So this is why I got my heart racing. I might as well finish it.
So you're making me think right now.
But then we look at it even more, right? We look at it even more. Now, I look on the side of Justin Gaethje. The same can be said for him. Definitely evolving his game. We look at it against Fitzeev. Definitely more polished. Definitely more controlled chaos, I would say. But we look at their last 5 fights. Who have I seen more tired? Who have I seen in more spots of bother? Who have I seen make consistent sort of movement patterns that someone as high level as a Max Holloway can meet with a knee, with an uppercut? And the thing with Max is he's not going to put everything behind his shots. He's going to pepper you. I think he's going to move a lot laterally. I don't think the calf kicks are going to be there like everyone says they are. Don't forget he faced Jose Aldo, one of the best calf kickers, twice and stopped him with strikes twice, made the adjustments against Volk in the last fight with the calf kicks. So he has that in his game. I can really see a world in where Justin Gaethje, it has this thing in his head of he is Mr. Highlight. It is UFC 300. He has 100% bonus. And he talks about in every interview how he's going to make this a spectacle. I can see him playing into that. And I can see Max being a little bit more reserved. I can see Justin being a little bit more goal-getting and tiring a little bit more. And if you tire against Max, it's game over. And I can actually see a finish from Max Holloway. I know it sounds crazy, but I can. A late stoppage in the 4th or 5th, I can see a finish.
Really? See that? Do you know what? I love that breakdown, by the way. And that's definitely got me thinking. Like the cogs are turning in my head right now. They were turning as you were speaking. My only thing, and I agree with a lot. Well, now that you've said it, I agree with a lot of what you've just said. The only thing that for me with that fight where I kind of think is the power. I don't know if Max has got the power to actually make Justin Gaethje respect him enough where Gaethje's not going to go hell to leather and just go hunting for that knockout because he's I don't know, man. I just think the power disadvantage in that fight is what scares me. And where Max has never been stopped, that also scares me because I like Max Holloway. But I can also see it. I can see UFC 300, the biggest, the lights are the brightest they've ever been, and him get stopped. I'd hate to see that, but that's for me. I think that's the most likely outcome. But with your breakdown, you might have swayed me a little bit more to. Max has probably got more of a chance in this fight than I'm probably giving him. But yeah, that was a.
And I want to say one more crazy thing on that.
Go on, man. I like that breakdown. Go ahead.
Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying Justin Gaethje's got no chance. There's every chance that Justin Gaethje's so dynamic, right? He has so many abilities that a lot of people don't have. Like I said, I don't think the calf kick's going to be there as much for Max Holloway. I don't think it will be as much as people are playing. But Justin's very unique where he can land that in the clinch. He can land that at range. And he'll eat a shot to give one of those. And they're debilitating. So he definitely has a lot of strengths. What I can see happening, right? I listen, there might be 100 people that come back to this interview and just clip it up and call me like stupid after the event. More than welcome to. But
every week.
To be honest, that these days I used to be a bit scared of going more bold in my predictions. Now I love it.
But, listen, I go all out, man. I don't give a damn.
For sure. The one thing I can see, and like I said, call me crazy, but you know, I don't know if you get this, but sometimes I just have these weird sort of epiphanies where I just see a few sequences and I just, for some reason, they just stick in my head and I can't unsee them. And I can see a world in where, cast your mind back to the Charles Oliveira fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gets a clean right hand, sends him to the canvas. And as good as Justin Gaethje is a wrestler, he's not the most proficient defensively in his grappling when it comes to sort of grappling jiu-jitsu, right?
100%.
Obviously, Oliveira is a different breed. I get that.
Yeah.
But let's just say there's a world in where Max has bulked up a little bit. He does sit down on his shots. Not every shot. He touches, he's moving a lot laterally. He's not really planting his feet on anything. And then boom, sits down on one of them punches and clips Justin and just catches him more by surprise than maybe even the power.
Yeah.
Stumbles him, right? We saw phases in Yair Rodriguez, Max Holloway, when Max found the back. He found those grappling opportunities, right? Now, I'm not sitting here saying that I definitely think he's going to submit him, but I don't think it's crazy to suggest that there may be some sequences where Max is grappling, to be honest, and he actually looks to exploit that deficiency, especially over 5 rounds, where, like I said, I think Max is always going to have the cardio advantage. I don't know. It's a small outside favorite, but it's not crazy. I don't think.
At 155, I don't think you're crazy for saying that, because he certainly has the grappling advantage against Gaethje. Not the wrestling, but definitely on the ground when it hits the mat in the jiu-jitsu. For sure. Just whilst we're on that fight, there's been rumors about a 165 division, haven't there? So I saw Max say something about possibly there being a 165. I think Rafael Fiziev came out and said something about the UFC making a 165 division and then possibly announcing it at UFC 300 press conference. If they do that, can you what do you think about the 165 division firstly?
Honestly, I think it's one of those things that purists will sit here and I'm sure you can make any argument for it. And to be honest, I've not really thought enough to probably give a coherent response, but just candidly, what I would say is it feels like one of those things that we would argue and discuss and say it'll be good, say it'll be bad, and say why we think it'll be bad and why it'll be good. And then it'll be a year down the line. It'll be fully integrated. We're seeing more title fights. Yeah. We're seeing more activity from high-level fighters. We're seeing people more at their comfortable weight class. We completely forget it was ever a discussion, and it's just the UFC as is, and we just enjoy it. So I'm not against it at all. I don't subscribe to the narrative of, it's going to be like boxing. It's not going to be like boxing. We're not going to have 2-3 pound increments. Yeah. But I do think that things like 155 to 170 is a big jump. I think 185 to 205. I think I think there's big jumps, right? I think there's big jumps. So
it should just be every 10 pounds. And eventually, when you get to them higher weight classes, maybe every 20 pounds or so, maybe have a 225 division as well, in my opinion. But with the 165 division, if they are to announce it at the 300 press conference, in my head, you just said you had like a little bit of an epiphany. For me, I had one the other night, and I'm like, you know what? UFC 300 press conference or post-fight press conference, one of those, Dana White sits there and says, we're going to bring in a 165-pound division. We're moving Leon to 175. He's going to be the champ there. And Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler.
That's what I was going to say.
And we're going to see 2024, McGregor's going to be the champ. I just have that in my head, man. And now that I've said it and out loud, I can't go back on it. But I hope I'm like secretly praying, because we've never covered a McGregor event, and I know I keep on going about McGregor, and UFC is, and MMA is not just about McGregor, but he's a massive part of it. But I can't wait to cover a McGregor event, and if it's for a championship belt, that will be even better, man. So I'm hoping.
I think that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah,
it makes all the sense in the world. People, what's frustrating, I'm sure that you see this sometimes online as well, is people sit there at home or they sit in the comment sections and they say, McGregor's not won in this many years and he's not full. I'm like, do you not see what's happening? Like, this is not the game we play. This is not a meritocracy. Like, have you not realized this yet? This is not a meritocracy whatsoever. This is big names, big numbers, business. Like that first and foremost. So people sit there and they get all riled up about it. I'm thinking, makes all the sense in the world. It's like a win-win, right? You bring Conor McGregor in, you have him for a championship belt, you make the fight even bigger. And what better way how else would you open that up?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then he becomes your first freeweight champion as well. Do you know what I mean? Adds to the legacy of McGregor.
There you go.
It makes all the sense, man. It makes all the sense. And that
knockouts at what, 4 weight classes?
That's what I'm saying, man.
Knock him out.
It would be mad. And then McGregor sails off into the sunset as the 165 champion, never defended a belt. It's like almost perfect. Almost perfect. Man.
True.
We'll do a couple more fights if you don't mind.
Of course, go for it, mate.
Yeah.
All yours.
What about the Zhang versus Yan fight? Should be in China, but it's on here. So what do you think about that?
I can't help but there's some fights that just have to be in certain locations. And listen, there's so many. The thing is with the UFC is we sit here and we don't have the full context, right? So there's so many things that go into it that maybe we aren't privy to. Maybe it's they want to increase the frequency of the belt. Maybe if they don't fight now, then they won't be able to get a fight in a certain amount of time. So there's so many different moving cogs, right? Yeah. But just from a general perspective, this fight should be in China. I think it
should be in Asia,
kind of clear. It should be in Asia. It should be in Asia at the very least, like you said. But you could make the argument and say, okay, well, there's no bigger event in UFC history. So what event would be better to have China versus China than this? And I think, that's a fair point as well, right? You can't really argue with that either. So
it
makes a lot of sense, of course, right? And that's one of the biggest demographics in the world in regards to Asia. And it's the same can be said with Africa when you're talking about Israel and Dricus. So these are big fights, and geographically they have a lot of impact to the sport, not just to the event. In regards to the matchup, Yan Chaonan obviously put a bit of streak together, obviously had some impressive performances, but I don't know. I just can't look past Zhang. I don't know what Yan Chaonan's path to victory would be. That's usually how I break down a fight. I don't know what it would be. Is she going to be able to grapple her? I don't see that happening.
That's a tough
out. Is she going to be able to strike? Yeah, it's a very tough out. Is she going to be able to strike with her for 5 rounds? Maybe. I just think it's a very tough fight, and I think
if she clips her, there's that.
Zhang's got the chin.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. That is true.
She's got the chin, so it's like it's one of those. I usually just the way I look at fights is when I'm predicting a winner is just okay. What's everyone's path to victory? And I just struggle to see a clear one from Yan Chaonan. It's not to say she can't get it done, but Zhang's just at that sort of level now where she's been operating at that sort of championship level for a good while now. And she's almost like grown into that sort of figure. She's grown into that spearhead of Chinese MMA. She's grown into her athletic ability. And now she's rounding it out with martial arts and IQ. I'm going to have to favor her in that for sure. Yeah.
No, fair. Yeah, I think most people will agree with you on that one. I think of all the fights, that's probably one of the ones where it's the least 50-50 on paper. But again, it's going to be a good scrap, and I'm looking forward to it. Last fight I want to speak about, and it's not really a fight, it's more just a fighter. Bo Nickel, man. Bo Nickel and Cody.
He's going to stand there. I knew where he's going with that.
A lot of people I saw on your page, I think you broke down why you think it's a good idea for him to be on the main card. And in that echoed what I had said. I actually think it makes sense. Why not put one of your rising stars on the biggest pay-per-view main cards that you can? But rather than asking you about this fight, because I think we know what's going to happen. Like, this is the one-sided fight on the card. What do you think about Bo Nickel and his trajectory to superstardom? Like, where do you see it going?
I think sometimes when people hear me talk about Bo Nickel, they think that I'm looking at things from a very surface level. He's got these wrestling credentials and he's unbeaten. He's going to the top.
Yeah.
No. That's a very, very small percentage of why I think he's going to be as good as I think he's going to be. I've listened to a lot of him. I've watched a lot of interviews. I listen to his podcast. I watch his day in the lives. I listen to his mindset. I listen to him talk about his career, his wrestling. And it's the intangibles that make me believe that he can be as great as he says he can be. Because we look at the skill set, right? The wrestling credential just off the chart. I don't need to go into them. So, okay, he's got that in his background. Then we have a look at his striking. He's obviously playing catch up, and he's never going to catch up, in fact. But you actually look at his striking and different things that he's doing. He's showing level changes constantly. He's constantly feinting. You have to respect that. So then he's bringing your hands down and he's coming upstairs with hooks. That's how we caught Val Woodburn, right? And then he's pieced him up 3 punches and knocked him out. People go, oh, his last minute's not all valid, but that isn't easy to do, especially on the biggest UFC. Sometimes people think if you're a good fighter, you perform good. That's not how it works. You're going into massive pay-per-views. You're going in with all this expectation, all this pressure, all these nerves, and to deliver to your full potential is just a completely different ballgame. But going back to what I was saying, when I listen to him speak, he doesn't drink, he doesn't party, he gets incredible sleep. His recovery is amazing in regards to his approach to the game. He breaks down his own game. He studies his own tape. He studies opponents' other tape. He studies the game of MMA. He picks the brains of all of the best. He gets the best training partners. He gets the best coaches. He's an exemplary professional. And I could speak for 10 minutes about all of these things. And the reason that's so important is because when you're trying to guess how good someone's going to be, it's hard. It's almost impossible. So you have to just look at as many different factors as you can. Now, there's every chance that he could fizzle out and not become of anything. But everything that you would look for in a superstar or anything that you would put into a perfect athlete, he has. In regards to mindset, in regards to preparation, in regards to understanding of the game, in regards to detaching his emotion from the sport. So many small nuances to the game that I think are often missed. And he has all of that. And that's why when I look at Bo Nickel, I think, yeah, this guy could really, really be something. Not just because he's a great wrestler and he's undefeated, but because his whole life is geared towards him being the best professional that he can be. And that's why I think he's going to be one of the pound for pound best. Yeah.
Yeah, and I 100% echo that. I think, we've got a lot to come from him, and he's in a division as well. I think one of the things that favor him is he's in a division where, at the moment, wrestling is not
true.
The biggest skill set in that division. So I think he could use that to get to the top. And I like the fact that they're slow burning him as well. They're not just putting him straight to the fire like they've done with other people. They're building him up very slowly. They're giving him slightly better fighters every time. And they're including him on cards like this to give him that kind of star power and to also introduce him to the bright lights, which I think is impressive from the UFC's perspective as well.
I think one more thing on that as well. I think what's kind of impressive from him is the fact that he acknowledges that and he isn't too hasty to just rush in there and get fights. It could be quite easy as a young, undefeated pro, very good wrestling, very confident, to think, I'm just going to go in and steamroll anyone. Keep giving me fights. Yeah. But he's very aware that he's got a lot to learn. And he takes his time in between fights. He obviously trains very hard, so he takes a couple of weeks off. Then he gets back into things. And then he has a fight, maybe in the next 6 months, the next 7 months. He's in no rush, like you just said. And I think, again, it's like the intangibles, right? You compare that to someone like Darren Till. All the skills and all the abilities in the world, very confident, comes in and gets thrown to the wolves, right? And then, not saying that was why he had a downfall, but it began it. But you look at Bo Nickel and they've sort of learned their thing and they think, right, okay, this guy could really be he's as blue chip prospect as we can get. Let's really try and curate his career. So, but man, you say that, and I've even been thinking about it leading up to this week. I'm thinking, when I first got into the sport, I used to see fights like this and I used to think, there's no way. Like, there is no way. But the more you watch MMA, the more you realize that there's no rules in this game. And the closer it gets, the more I'm thinking, Oh my god, could it? Could it?
Nah, Cody, I can tell you this for sure, man. And clip it if you want. But Cody Brundage ain't winning this fight. But yeah, no, I mean, he's another test for him for Bo for sure. This is his biggest test, that's for certain. I mean, Val Woodburn, bless him, he got in there and was brave, stepped up in weight class, but you know, he didn't deserve to be in the octagon with Bo Nickel, and that's early on in Bo's career. So, yeah, Cody Brundage is definitely a big test for him. But I think he comes through it with flying colours, puts in a massive performance, and gets a highlight reel stoppage of some form, whether it's a knockout or a submission. But that's my thoughts anyway. One more fight then. We'll quickly go one more fight, then we'll be done. And a quick breakdown. This is another fight with title implications. Calvin Kattar and Aljamain. Aljo's first fight at 145. For me, I think Aljo can get it done with the ground game, but I'm worried because I love Aljo. I'm a bit worried about Kattar's boxing. I think if anyone's going to piece you up, it's going to be Calvin Kattar. Well, what are your thoughts about this fight? And do you think either of them can eventually challenge at 145?
I'm just so intrigued to see what Aljo looks like, to be honest, because I'm a big fan of him, right? And you look at his most recent loss, again, a lot of nuance to it, turning around very quickly, a lot of injuries, burnt out, a lot of different things. Not taking anything away from Sean, I'm one of his biggest fans, but what does Aljo look like?
UFC set that one up nicely for him. Let's not lie.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. They know what they're doing.
100%.
Yeah,
like this is as clear as day. Honestly, if you just listen to both of their podcasts on a consistent basis and you see the way that the UFC operated, that was 100% created like that. There's no doubt about it. But it's just such a conundrum because, mate, what does Aljo look like when he's not having to deplete his body, when he can train, when he can enjoy it, when he can sit down on his punches a little bit more, where he has an even better gas tank? Like, let's not forget, he's got one of the best gas tanks, and now he's going to be doing that upper weight class.
Yeah.
And if that man gets into grappling exchange, it's over. Like, it's over. It's not even, there's not a question. You're not getting out of that. And this could be 145, 155. His weight, his strength, and his skills are going to translate. I think it's a very valid point talking about Calvin Kattar's boxing because it's so crisp. The one rebuttal I have to that is the interesting thing about this fight is you have two people on the opposite sides of the spectrum. You have Calvin Kattar, who's an extremely conventional boxer, who's going to give you very conventional looks at a very high level, make no mistake, but very conventional looks. And then you have the Funk Master, who sets up his hands with his kicks on a weird rhythm, on a weird pattern, and he'll throw big kicks to close the distance and get to the body locks.
I was going to say, all of that is to set up his wrestling, which is so crazy, yeah. No, it's fact.
This is the thing, right? So it's like, usually people use their hands, then their kicks, and then they'll maybe wrestle. But Aljo does it backwards, and he does it on a funky pattern where he'll throw kicks to his hands, to his wrestling. Yeah. So it's like almost backwards. So it's almost like the conventional versus the unconventional guy. And I can see this fight going any which way. Like, I genuinely can. I can see Kattar just landing bomb elbows and just obliterating Aljo. But I'm going to have to favour Aljo just on the grappling. I think he's going to get his hands on him. And I think if he does, I think he's going to steal rounds. And I'd be very surprised that if he gets to his back with time, I'd be very surprised at this weight class if he didn't submit him.
Yeah.
With a rear naked choke.
I think that's how it goes down, actually. I think that Aljo probably does get the first round finish. I think he goes... Yeah, I can see that. I mean, we've seen it before. I think he's just a backpack. Once he gets close to you, which Calvin Kattar, like you say, is so conventional. I think that Aljo is going to be able to unpick that quite quickly, the patterns, and hopefully get a grappling exchange. And if he does, I can see it finishing quite quickly. But yeah, it's another great fight. What do you think about Aljo's chances at fighting someone like a Topuria? Because, I mean, we're talking about someone that's dangerous everywhere in Topuria.
My honest assessment of that is it can go one of two ways, in my opinion. We can be talking on, or be Sunday for me here, or Monday even, and we could be thinking, oh my goodness, what would it look like if he was in there Topuria after that showing, you know? Oh my God, that could have been a bloodbath. Or we could be thinking, flipping hell, that's an interesting matchup. Because who can really grapple with Topuria at 145 in the top 5?
Yeah, I mean, people would say Brian Ortega, but nothing compares to Aljo, I think, at 145.
Like, Ortega's got obviously unbelievable grappling, but he's almost a little bit different to Aljo, where he's very opportunistic, right? You look at his fights, he jumps onto things, he jumps onto guillotines, he jumps onto like against Volk, even the standing guillotine that he got. He's very opportunistic, where Aljo's a little bit different. He's not just going to jump on submissions. He's going to jump on you and then methodically work towards a submission, right? So it's a little bit different. And I couldn't help but just see a fight between Ilia Topuria and Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega just getting beaten up in boxing range. But because Aljo's so weird, he gives looks that no one's ever given you before. So it's very, very easy to see a world in where he grabs a leg or like gets a hook in, you know?
So get it done, yeah.
I don't know is the answer. Like, ask me next week.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it next week, you know?
Sure. But yeah, I mean, we've covered most of the fights on 300. I think we're good to stop it there. Tell the people where they can find you, because I think that's important if they don't follow the page already.
Casuals.corner.mma on every platform: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Website is casualsmedia.co.uk. And that's pretty much everything. Yeah, every daily content, every day, multiple pieces every day. So you will never, if you don't like MMA, don't follow it. But if you do like it, then I can give you something to probably enjoy at least once a day. So yeah, drop me a follow if you want.
At least once a day. Nah, man, go follow the page. It's a great page. We've been following ever since we met you. And like I said, I enjoy following the journey that you're currently on in Thailand. I think for me, that's been a really good series to follow. The food fighters is always a favorite for me too. But just the general MMA content is great as well. So keep doing what you're doing, man. We appreciate it. Appreciate you locking us in, having an interview, and hopefully we'll do something again soon.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I know this has been long overdue. We've been trying to get this in a diary for. It's taken me to fly to the other side of the world and be on a different time zone to actually get it done. But UFC 300 is a good place to start. So yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
When you're back in England, we want you back in the cave as well. So we'll sort that out at some point. You need to come and check out the studio, man. That would be good for you to come through, man. But yeah, all right, my brother. Thank you for coming on, man. Appreciate you.